Let me start by saying this. I'm not the kind of person who likes to cause trouble. Really, I'm not. But when you own something, especially a piece of property, you expect people to respect it. That's fair, right? You wouldn't walk into someone else's house and rearrange their furniture without asking, would you? So why should it be any different with land or buildings? My warehouse is special to me. It's been in my family for years, handed down from my grandfather, who worked hard to buy it. The building sits on the edge of Willow Creek, just outside the main residential area where everyone lives in their neatly painted houses with matching mailboxes. My warehouse isn't fancy. It's old, sturdy, and functional. I use it mostly for storage, and sometimes I tinker around there on weekends, working on projects that don't quite fit in my garage at home. The best part about the warehouse is that it's zoned as commercial property, which means the Homeowners Association, HOA, has no say over what happens there. Their rules, the ones about flower colors, mailbox styles, and how long your grass can grow, don't apply to me out there. Or at least, that's what I thought until recently. It all started small. One day, I noticed a car parked near the gravel lot next to the warehouse. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe someone needed extra space while they hosted a party or had guests over. No big deal, right? People borrow spaces sometimes. It's human nature. But then another car showed up. And another. Before I knew it, my empty lot looked like a parking lot. Cars were squeezed together, taking up every inch of available space. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself it was temporary. But soon, the cars became a regular sight. Some mornings, I drive by and see rows of vehicles lined up like dominoes. They weren't just ordinary sedans either. There were pickup trucks, SUVs, even a beat-up van once. The gravel was getting torn up by tires, and oil stains began appearing on the ground. Then came the trash. Empty soda cans, fast food wrappers, and cigarette butts littered the edges of the lot. It was starting to feel less like my property, and more like a public dumping ground. That's when I realized something wasn't right. This wasn't an accident or a coincidence. Someone, or some group of people, had decided that my warehouse lot was now their personal overflow parking zone. And the worst part, nobody bothered to ask me. When I finally figured out who was behind it, I couldn't believe it. It wasn't random strangers or visitors from other neighborhoods. It was my own neighbors. The same people who waved hello during morning walks and brought casseroles when someone got sick. Except now, instead of being friendly, they were treating my property like it belonged to them. And the kicker? The HOA was involved. Yes, the very organization that claims to protect property values and keep things orderly had somehow decided it was okay to let residents park illegally on private land. How did I find out? Well, that story comes later. But trust me, when I heard the details, I felt a mix of anger, disbelief, and determination. Because if there's one thing I've learned in life, it's this. If you don't stand up for yourself, no one else will. So yeah, things were about to get interesting. Little did I know, towing those cars would turn into the biggest showdown Willow Creek had ever seen. It all came to a head at the monthly HOA meeting, a predictable yet infuriating event held in the community center's stuffy gymnasium. The room was packed, as usual, with neighbors sitting in folding chairs that squeaked every time someone shifted uncomfortably. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting an unflattering glow on everyone's faces. At the front of the room stood Mr. Hargrove, the self-appointed leader of Willow Creek, looking smug in his perfectly tailored suit and tie. He always had this way of speaking, like he was addressing royalty instead of a bunch of suburbanites worried about whose dog kept digging holes in flower beds. As many of you know, he began, clearing his throat for dramatic effect. Our neighborhood continues to face challenges regarding parking availability. His voice carried that tone of authority, like he was delivering a TED talk on solving world hunger. Our streets are overcrowded, especially during events and holidays. This is not only inconvenient but also poses potential safety risks. I leaned forward in my chair, narrowing my eyes. Where was he going with this? Then it hit me, the warehouse lot. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as he continued. To address this pressing issue, Mr. Hargrove said, adjusting his glasses, we've implemented a forward-thinking solution. We've reached an agreement with Ms. Carter. He gestured vaguely in my direction without making eye contact. To utilize her warehouse property for additional parking. Wait. What? My jaw dropped. Agreement. With asterisk me asterisk. My hand shot up before I could stop myself. Excuse me. I called out, louder than I intended. Heads turned toward me, some curious, others annoyed. What exactly do you mean by agreement? Mr. Hargrove gave me a tight-lipped smile, the kind reserved for people who dare to question his brilliance. Ms. Carter, surely you understand the importance of community spirit. Your unused lot has provided much-needed relief for our residents. It's a win-win situation. Unused. Relief. Win-win. Was he living in the same reality as the rest of us? My warehouse lot wasn't unused. It was private property being hijacked without permission. And relief. Try destruction. Tire tracks crisscrossed the gravel, oil stains dotted the ground, and trash littered the perimeter. Not to mention the noise. Engines revving late at night, doors slamming early in the morning. This wasn't relief. It was chaos. But Mr. Hargrove wasn't done. We appreciate your cooperation, Miss Carter, he added, ignoring my obvious outrage. It shows that you truly care about the well-being of our community. Cooperation. The word burned in my ears. There had been no discussion, no request, no please or thank you, just assumption, arrogance, entitlement. These people thought they could use my property however they wanted because it was for the greater good. After the meeting ended, I stormed outside, fuming. A few neighbors approached me, their expressions ranging from sheepish to defensive. Mrs. Harper, the queen of passive-aggressive comments, sidled up to me with a saccharine smile. "Emily, dear," she said sweetly, "we're so grateful for your generosity. You've really helped ease the parking crunch." Generosity. Oh, she had nerve. "Mrs. Harper," I replied through gritted teeth, "I didn't agree to anything. Nobody asked me if they could park there." Her smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Well, hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? Besides, it's just temporary. Surely you can see how this benefits everyone." Benefits everyone. That's when it clicked. They didn't see my warehouse as mine anymore. To them, it was a resource, a utility, something to be exploited for convenience. They weren't thinking about me or my rights. They were thinking about themselves and their problems. And the HOA. They'd sanctioned this invasion under the guise of solving a community issue. Never mind the fact that they were trampling over private property rights. As I drove home that night, anger simmered in my chest. This wasn't just about parking spaces or torn-up gravel. It was about respect, or the lack thereof. If I didn't put a stop to this now, it would only get worse. Willow Creek might pride itself on its pristine lawns and friendly faces, but beneath the surface, entitlement ran deep, and I wasn't about to let it run roughshod over me. By the time I got home that night, my mind was racing. I couldn't believe what had just happened at the HOA meeting, or rather, what hadn't happened. No one had apologized. No one had even acknowledged that they'd done something wrong. Instead, they acted like using my property without permission was perfectly normal, even noble. For the greater good, they said. It made me sick. I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started drafting a letter. Not just any letter, a certified cease and desist notice. I wanted to make sure there was no room for misunderstanding this time. The words poured out of me, clear and firm. Asterisk, asterisk. This is private property. You do not have permission to park on it. Effective immediately, all unauthorized vehicles will be towed at the owner's expense. Asterisk, asterisk. After printing multiple copies, I drove back to the warehouse early the next morning. Armed with tape, a hammer, and a stack of signs I'd ordered online, I got to work. Along the perimeter of the lot, I posted bright yellow signs that read in bold letters, asterisk asterisk, private property, TOA zone asterisk asterisk. I even added smaller notes underneath for emphasis. Asterisk asterisk, unauthorized vehicles will be towed immediately asterisk asterisk. If people chose to ignore these warnings, that was on them. The reaction came faster than I expected. By mid-morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop with missed calls and texts. Neighbors who rarely spoke to me suddenly became very interested in having a conversation. One message stood out. It was from Mrs. Harper, of course. "Emily, those signs are unnecessary. Let's talk about this calmly." Calmly. She had some nerve after everything. But things escalated quickly when someone left a handwritten note on my windshield. It was short and snarky. "This isn't very neighborly of you, Emily." Neighborly? Seriously. These people weren't acting like neighbors. They were acting like entitled freeloaders. I crumpled up the note and tossed it into the trash. Later that afternoon, Mr. Hargrove himself showed up at my door. He looked annoyed, which was satisfying to see. For once, he wasn't standing behind a podium or hiding behind fancy language. "Ms. Carter," he began, his tone clipped, "your actions are causing significant disruption." "My actions?" I shot back, crossing my arms. "You mean enforcing my rights as a property owner? Or are you referring to the fact that I'm finally standing up to your so-called solution?" He adjusted his tie, clearly uncomfortable. "We're simply trying to address a community need. Surely we can find a compromise." "A compromise?" I repeated, incredulous. "How about this? Ask before you use someone else's property. That's called respect, Mr. Hargrove." He didn't have an answer for that. After a few more awkward exchanges, he left, muttering something about discussing the matter further at the next HOA meeting. Yeah, right. Like I was going to let this drag on any longer. As the day wore on, tensions grew thicker. Some neighbors tried guilt-tripping me, saying things like, "What if someone needed a safe place to park during an emergency?" Others accused me of being selfish and unreasonable. A few even threatened legal action, claiming the HOA had every right to facilitate community resources. Resources. My warehouse wasn't a resource. It was mine. Despite the backlash, I refused to budge. Every time someone complained, I pointed to the signs. Every time someone argued, I reminded them that I'd never agreed to this arrangement in the first place. And every time someone threatened me, I stayed calm and firm. This wasn't personal. It was principle. That evening, as I locked up the warehouse and headed home, I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was proud of myself for taking a stand. On the other, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Willow Creek prided itself on its tight-knit community, but scratch beneath the surface, and you'd find cracks. Cracks born of entitlement and misplaced priorities. Still, I knew I'd made the right decision. Sometimes, doing the right thing means ruffling feathers. And if towing a few cars was what it took to remind people of basic respect, then so be it. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose. Enough was enough. It was time to take action, real action. I wasn't just going to post signs and hope people listened. I was going to make sure they understood the consequences of ignoring me. So, after a quick cup of coffee to steady my nerves, I picked up the phone and called a towing company. When the guy on the other end answered, I tried to sound confident. "Hi, I need some cars towed from my property," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. "How many are we talking about?" He asked casually, like this was an everyday request. "All of them," I replied. There was a pause on the other end. Then he chuckled. "All right, ma'am. We'll bring 2 trucks and a flatbed. Give us an hour." An hour later, the cavalry arrived. 2 massive tow trucks rumbling down the gravel road leading to my warehouse, followed by a flat trailer big enough to haul a small bus. The driver hopped out, clipboard in hand, and gave me a nod. "Where do you want us to start?" "Every single car," I said, gesturing toward the lot. "None of these belong here." He grinned as if he'd been waiting for a job like this all week. "You got it." For the next few hours, I stood back and watched as the operation unfolded. Each vehicle was hooked up, lifted, and loaded onto the trucks or flagged with practiced efficiency. Sedans, SUVs, pickup trucks, it didn't matter what kind of car it was. If it was parked illegally on my property, it was getting towed. And let me tell you, there's something deeply satisfying about seeing someone else's mess being cleaned up at their expense. By noon, the lot was completely empty. The transformation was striking. Where chaos had reigned just hours earlier, there was now peace and order. No more tire tracks tearing up the gravel. No more oil stains marring the ground. No more trash littering the edges. Just silence. Blissful silence. Of course, karma has a way of swinging back quickly when you least expect it. As soon as the last truck pulled away, my phone started blowing up again. Missed calls, text messages, voicemails. It was overwhelming. People were frantic, demanding answers. "Where's my car? Why did you tow us? Do you know how much this is going to cost?" And then came the visitors. One by one, angry neighbors showed up at my door, their faces red with indignation. Mrs. Harper led the charge, storming into my driveway like she owned the place. "You towed our cars?" she shrieked, her perfectly coiffed hair quivering with rage. "How could you do such a thing?" "I warned you," I said calmly, holding up a copy of the sign I posted. "Private property. Tow-away zone. Pretty clear, don't you think?" She spluttered but couldn't argue. The signs were everywhere, impossible to miss. Still, she wasn't done. "This is outrageous. What if someone needed their car for work or an emergency?" "Funny you should mention emergencies," I shot back. "Did anyone consider asking permission before using my property? That would have been the responsible thing to do." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Behind her, a small crowd had gathered, muttering among themselves. Some looked embarrassed, others furious. A few even tried to play the victim card, claiming they didn't realize the rules applied to them. But the piece de resistance came when Mr. Hargrove himself showed up. He marched into my driveway, his face flushed and his tie slightly askew, a rare sight for the usually polished man. "You towed our cars?" he demanded, pointing a finger at me like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. "Yes, I did," I replied, crossing my arms. "And I'll do it again if I have to." His jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might explode. But instead, he took a deep breath and attempted to regain control of the situation. "This isn't over, Miss Carter," he said through gritted teeth. "We'll discuss this further at the next HOA meeting." I shrugged. "Fine by me. But until then, stay off my property." As he turned to leave, I noticed a flicker of doubt in his eyes. For the first time, I saw a crack in his armor. Maybe, just maybe, he realized he'd pushed too far this time. Still, the day wasn't without its challenges. By evening, social media was ablaze with posts about the parking fiasco. Someone had created a Reddit thread titled, "HOA, let members illegally park in my warehouse. I towed them all." Comments poured in from strangers weighing in on both sides. Some praised me for standing up for myself, while others accused me of being unreasonable. The debate raged on, but I didn't care. I'd made my point loud and clear. Respect matters, and actions have consequences. As I sat on my porch that night, sipping tea and enjoying the quiet, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and triumph. The battle wasn't over, but I'd won the first round, and that was worth celebrating. The fallout from the towing incident hit like a storm. It wasn't just a few grumbles or passive-aggressive comments anymore. This was full-blown chaos. My phone buzzed nonstop, lighting up with angry texts and voicemails. Neighbors I barely knew suddenly became very interested in having long conversations about community spirit and fairness. Some begged for leniency, claiming they couldn't afford the towing fees. Others accused me of being heartless, saying things like, "What if someone had an emergency?" As if emergencies gave them permission to park wherever they pleased. But the real circus began when people started showing up at my house en masse. By late afternoon, my driveway looked like a neighborhood meeting had spontaneously erupted. Mrs. Harper led the charge, her face red and her voice shrill as she demanded answers. "You can't just tow people's cars without warning," she exclaimed, pacing back and forth like she owned the place. "Did warn you?" I replied calmly, holding up one of the bright yellow signs I'd posted around the lot. "Private property. Tow-away zone. You chose to ignore it." She spluttered, clearly unprepared for that response. Behind her, others chimed in, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of complaints. One man shouted, "This is ridiculous. Do you know how much it costs to get a car out of impound?" Another woman added, "We're your neighbors. Is this really how you treat us?" I crossed my arms and stood my ground. "First of all, you didn't act like my neighbors when you decided my property was fair game. Second, those fees are between you and the towing company, not me." Their frustration grew palpable, but none of them could argue with the facts. The signs were clear, the warnings explicit. They'd been given every opportunity to respect my boundaries. But they hadn't. Now they were paying the price, literally and figuratively. As the crowd pressed closer, I noticed subtle shifts in their behavior. Some people looked genuinely ashamed, avoiding eye contact as they realized how entitled they'd been. Others remained defiant, shooting daggers at me with their eyes. A few even tried guilt-tripping me, pulling out every trick in the book. "My kid has a doctor's appointment tomorrow, and now I don't have a car." One woman cried dramatically. "What am I supposed to do?" "You could have thought about that before parking illegally on private property." I shot back, refusing to budge. "This isn't my problem. It's yours." Meanwhile, the drama spilled over into social media. Someone created a Reddit thread titled, "HOA let members illegally park in my warehouse. I towed them all." Within hours, it blew up. Commenters weighed in from all sides, turning my personal battle into a public spectacle. Some called me a hero, applauding my decision to stand up to the HOA and reclaim my rights. Others labeled me selfish and unreasonable, accusing me of overreacting. The debate raged on, with strangers dissecting every detail of the situation. Back in Willow Creek, tempers continued to flare. That evening, someone vandalized my property. When I went outside to check on the warehouse, I found my tires slashed and the word "jerk" spray painted across my garage door. Ryan wanted to call the police immediately, but I hesitated. Part of me understood why they were upset. They felt embarrassed, exposed, maybe even betrayed by someone who refused to play along. But another part of me knew this reaction proved my point. When people are used to getting their way, they lash out when they don't. Still, the vandalism marked a turning point. After the initial shock wore off, the anger began to subside. People retrieved their cars, grumbling the whole way, and stopped using my lot altogether. The gravel slowly returned to its natural state, free of tire tracks and oil stains. Trash disappeared from the edges of the property, replaced by quiet emptiness. Looking back, I realized something important. Standing up for yourself isn't easy, especially when it means going against the grain. But sometimes it's necessary. If I hadn't drawn a line in the sand, the HOA would have kept pushing their agenda. And everyone else would have followed suit. Respect isn't automatic. It's earned through action, not assumption. By the end of the week, things had calmed down significantly. The neighborhood fell into an uneasy silence, like the calm after a hurricane. People avoided me at the grocery store, whispering behind my back, instead of confronting me directly. But I didn't care. For the first time in weeks, my warehouse felt like mine again. And that was worth every ounce of stress. As I locked up the building one evening, I couldn't help but smile. The battle wasn't over, but I'd won the war. And deep down, I knew one thing for sure. No one would ever take my property for granted again. The days that followed felt like living in a pressure cooker. Willow Creek, usually so picture-perfect with its manicured lawns and polite smiles, had turned into a simmering pot of resentment and tension. My bold move to tow the cars had sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, and while some people quietly respected my decision, others weren't ready to let it go. The HOA called an emergency meeting just 2 days after the towing incident. The gymnasium was packed again, but this time, the atmosphere was electric, charged with anger, frustration, and even a little fear. People whispered nervously as they filed into their seats, casting sideways glances at me when they thought I wasn't looking. I could feel the weight of their stares as I took my seat near the back, arms crossed, ready for whatever came next. Mr. Hargrove opened the meeting with his usual polished demeanor, but there was a crack in his armor tonight. His tie wasn't perfectly straight, and his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, clearing his throat, "we are here tonight to address recent events concerning Ms. Carter's warehouse property." I braced myself. Here we go. He went on to describe the situation in vague terms, carefully avoiding words like towing or illegal parking. Instead, he framed it as a misunderstanding, a simple miscommunication between neighbors. "Miss Carter has expressed concerns about her property being used without permission," he said, glancing briefly in my direction. "While her actions may seem extreme, we must remember that private property rights are important." Extreme? Oh, please, as if towing illegally parked cars was somehow unreasonable. Then came the kicker. The HOA demanded that I reimburse everyone for the towing fees. According to them, I had caused unnecessary financial hardship by not giving adequate notice. Adequate notice? Hadn't the signs been enough? Apparently not, according to Mr. Hargrove, who insisted that verbal warnings should have preceded the towing. The room erupted into murmurs. Some nodded in agreement, while others rolled their eyes. Mrs. Harper raised her hand eagerly, practically bouncing in her seat. "Mr. Hargrove, doesn't this set a dangerous precedent?" she asked dramatically. "If one person can tow cars without warning, what's to stop anyone else from doing the same? What stopped them? Respect for other people's property, maybe." When it was finally my turn to speak, I stood up slowly, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "You all parked illegally on my property without asking. You ignored the signs I posted. And now you expect *me* to pay for your mistakes." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but I kept going. "This isn't about towing fees or adequate notice. It's about respect. If you want to use someone else's property, you ask first. That's how this works." A few people shifted awkwardly in their seats, unable to meet my gaze. Others looked defiant, refusing to admit they'd done anything wrong. But beneath the surface, I could see cracks forming. For every person who clung to their sense of entitlement, there was another who seemed to realize they'd crossed a line. After the meeting ended, things didn't improve immediately. The vandalism continued. Someone keyed my car, and another note appeared on my windshield calling me selfish. But the tide was turning. Slowly, people began to retrieve their towed vehicles, grumbling under their breath, but ultimately accepting responsibility for their actions. By the end of the week, the lot remained empty. No new cars appeared, no trash littered the edges. Peace returned to my warehouse, though the scars of conflict lingered. Neighbors avoided eye contact when they saw me, and conversations were stilted at best. But none of that mattered because I'd accomplished what I set out to do. I reclaimed my property and sent a clear message. As I sat on my porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I reflected on everything that had happened. Standing up for yourself isn't easy. It comes with consequences, backlash, and sleepless nights. But it also comes with clarity. I learned that boundaries aren't just lines drawn on a map. They're principles worth defending. And sometimes, the hardest battles yield the sweetest victories. Willow Creek might never fully understand why I did what I did, and honestly, I didn't care anymore. What mattered was that I stood my ground and proved that respect is earned, not given freely. Looking back on everything that happened, I can't help but feel a strange mix of emotions: pride, exhaustion, and even a little sadness. Willow Creek isn't the same place it was before all this drama unfolded. The neighborhood has changed, not just for me, but for everyone involved. Some relationships have been strained beyond repair, while others have grown stronger in unexpected ways. It's funny how conflict can do that, bring people together or drive them apart, depending on how they choose to respond. For me, this entire ordeal reinforced something I already knew deep down. Standing up for yourself is hard, but it's also necessary. If I had stayed quiet, if I had let the HOA and my neighbors trample over my property without saying a word, what would that have said about me? That I didn't value my own rights. That I didn't respect myself enough to demand fairness. No, thank you. I'd rather deal with backlash than live with regret. But here's the thing. Not everyone saw it that way. To some people, I'll always be the woman who towed our cars. They'll remember the inconvenience more than the principle behind it. And honestly, I've come to accept that. You can't please everyone, no matter how reasonable you are. What matters most is knowing you did the right thing, even when it wasn't easy. The warehouse lot remains empty now, exactly as it should be. Tire tracks have faded, oil stains have worn away, and trash no longer litters the edges. It's peaceful there again, almost like nothing ever happened. But every time I drive past, I'm reminded of the lesson I learned. Boundaries aren't just physical, they're emotional and psychological too. When you set limits, people may push back, but eventually they'll adjust or they'll leave. Either way, you win because you stay true to yourself. As for the HOA, well, things haven't gone back to normal between us. Mr. Hargrove still gives me frosty looks at meetings, and Mrs. Harper avoids me entirely. But interestingly enough, the parking issue seems to have resolved itself. People found creative solutions: carpooling, using nearby public lots, or simply planning ahead. Funny how necessity sparks innovation, isn't it? What surprised me most, though, was the support I received from unlikely places. A few neighbors privately thanked me for taking a stand. "You were brave," one man admitted during a chance encounter at the grocery store. "We needed someone to call out the nonsense." Even Ryan, who initially worried about the fallout, told me he was proud of me. "Not many people would have stood their ground like that," he said. "Those small moments of validation meant more to me than I expected." Still, I know this experience changed me. I'm more cautious now, more aware of how quickly entitlement can creep into a community. Willow Creek prides itself on its charm and neighborliness, but beneath the surface, cracks run deep. This incident exposed those cracks and forced us all to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and each other. If I could give advice to anyone facing a similar situation, it would be this: don't wait until your patience runs out. Set boundaries early, communicate clearly, and enforce consequences consistently. It's tempting to avoid conflict, to hope problems will solve themselves, but they rarely do. Sometimes, you have to take the first step, even if it feels terrifying. In the end, towing those cars wasn't just about reclaiming my property. It was about reclaiming my voice. For years, I'd gone along with the flow, avoiding confrontation, and prioritizing harmony over honesty. But this time, I chose differently. And I'm glad I did. Because life's too short to let others dictate your worth or walk all over your values. Now, as I sit on my porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, I feel a sense of peace. My warehouse stands quietly in the distance, a symbol of resilience and determination. The scars of battle may remain, the slashed tires, the spray-painted garage door, but so does the knowledge that I fought for what was mine. And really, Isn't that what owning property and standing up for yourself is all about?